Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Sarah. Good morning, Caitlin. Good morning, Manpreet.
Dr. Morris is here too.
Oh, good morning, Dr. Morris.
Shaved just for this occasion. You see
I
my
love
face, right?
that.
No. Good morning.
Golden Charters in the building.
We in the house and we
Yeah.
golden. We be shining up in here now.
All right, I'll
It's
go ahead and
excellence.
yep. All right, I get started and then we'll have people hop in as they join the waiting room. So welcome everyone to our webinar Wednesday. My name is Shay. I am the community manager here at Parsec Education. And if you're joining us, feel free to share your name and what school you're from in the chat. We love to make this super interactive. So just some housekeeping rules that we have. Today's session will be recorded and you will receive a recording of the slides by email and the video recording. Please use the chat, like I said, to share your thoughts, drop any questions that you may have for our guest as they come up, and then we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. And we are super excited to make this interactive, so please don't be shy. And then today, I am super thrilled to be joined by one of our special partners, Taletha Washburn. She is the executive director at Plumas Charter School. And then we have our very own Patrick Swisher, who is the partner success team lead here at Parsec Education. A little bit about Taletha. She has been with Plumas for 22 years. She serves as the ED, like I mentioned, and she has working knowledge on all things related to charter, which include governance, fiscal management, curriculum, staff oversight, facilities development, student assessment, program development, grant writing, and CTE programs. And so together, this webinar will be about how they worked hand in hand through a really unique charter renewal process. And today they'll be sharing their insights on a couple things. All right. So what they'll be talking about today is why Plumas's charter renewal was a little bit different. We're going to look at their journey, which includes how they navigated their district receiving a 5-year charter renewal. We'll look at how Parsec provided grounded, data-driven approach that offered assurance through a stressful time of the unknowns. And then Taletha will talk about the importance of knowing your audience. So why is it critical to understand what your district or charter leadership values most when you're presenting your petition? And then we'll dive into some data. We have Parsec Education, we're all about data, and so we'll be sharing some graphs that were used in order to support their charter renewal support. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Taletha to get started on our webinar today.
Great. Thanks, Shay. Hi, everyone. My name is Taletha, and I've been with Plumas Charter for over 20 years, serving as the executive director for 14. So lots of history there with navigating turbulent waters and all variants therein. So charter renewal, as we all know, is really complex. And what I wanted to share today is not the whole picture. It's what was most important and different in ours. So I kind of wanted to share a disclaimer here that we know there's a lot of elements that go into a renewal. And what we're going to focus on today is how important some targeted academic data was for comparative purposes. But we know that fiscal solvency and governance is really important, and not less important than what we're going to share. But there was some pieces to ours that just made it unique, that we were focusing heavily on a couple other components, but all the rest of it has to be in place in order to be successful with a renewal. So I didn't want to gloss over any of that. And then we had a lot of turbulence coming into this renewal, and I'm going to share that. And what we really wanted to highlight our single most important element was our academic indicators and how we were outperforming the district. And I know in some cases you don't really want to do that because it can be upsetting. However, for us, for a variety of reasons, it just was really important because we were coming out of a couple of different, traumatic and challenging events that led up to renewal. So I wanted to have my disclaimer there. And just a little bit about Plumas Charter. This school was founded in '98. It's number 146, so it is one of the oldest in California. It's been through a lot of iterations during its almost 30 years. But we are considered a non-classroom based school, which is a misnomer because within our 3 sites in Plumas County, 2 of them do offer 4 days a week on-site instruction, which makes us very much of a hybrid. But we are still considered at our core non-classroom based, and we're extremely rural. So we're an hour and a half from Chico, an hour and a half from Reno. Population of Plumas County is, maybe 20,000 people. It's the size of Rhode Island. There's a lot of people, very geographically widespread, very mountainous. Our school is relatively small. We have about 360 students throughout Plumas County, 18% sped, 60% unduplicating. In 2021, kind of following on the heels of COVID, we had a series of wildfires, and the Dixie Fire was the largest, and it was extremely devastating for our county. We lost a town, the town of Greenville, which we are now trying to actively rebuild. We lost a school site in that process. And then, within our kind of general area in California, over 1 million acres burned. So it was a lot, and we're still coming out of that. There was a lot of responsive activity that had to happen coming out of that, a lot of perseverance to get things regrounded, stabilized, up and running. And our school district, coming out of COVID and fires and a kind of slew of not great leadership, they found themselves in a real sticky situation last year as needing to go into receivership. So really, I think one of the fundamental differences as to why our renewal was so different is because our district is in active receivership, and it started right when we were starting our renewal. And I'll share a little bit more about what that looks like, but there's important lessons that are kind of more general from that. And I personally have been through 8 district superintendents and 4 renewals. And each district leadership, as probably many of you know, with each changeover in leadership brings something different, usually a different approach, a different feeling, response to charter, a different point of tension with the charter. We've kind of seen all different weird stuff come out of changes in leadership. So our renewal landscape, it was just that, kind of coming out of many years of trauma in the county. Those of you who work in areas who have experienced, a variety of traumatic events that has deep impact on staff and students, their performance, their engagement with school. There's just a lot of effects that come out of, large scale traumatic events like what we have been through. So our landscape was on the heels of these events and also with our district receivership. So what that means is the board goes away. So our school found our district, not our school's fine. Our school district found itself in significant financial dire straits, right? They were in the hole $9 million, and they could not dig themselves out. And so they were forced into a receivership situation, which means the state now in effect runs the district. So a district administrator was placed by the state, more or less, to the district to basically serve as the decision maker. So our board went away. And that could be for better or for worse. In this case, I'm not really sure. But basically, the district governing board was gone. District leadership, existing leadership, no longer could make decisions. Now it's the one administrator. So that happened going into this renewal, and that became traumatic for me, right? That was a lot of unknowns for me going into this process. How is this going to work? I don't know this person. Is this going to be good? Is it going to be bad? I have no idea. It made me incredibly nervous and anxious to go into the renewal with that many unknowns. And so this is kind of when I discovered Parsec, right? And this is where they come in. Is I'm coming into this process of renewal. I'm really scared about it. And here, I go to CSDC conference, and here's Parsec, and here's what they offer. And I'm like, this is kind of amazing. What does this mean? And so we onboarded with Parsec last year, and we started with a dashboard, and then we made the decision school-wide to onboard the renewal service, because for me, I felt like I needed that support in that moment because of these unknowns, that I didn't want to kind of go in it or approach it how I normally did. I wanted help. Much more help. And so that's kind of what Parsec did. And Patrick and I started working together to review all of our performance indicators, all of our demographic information, and really try to pull out, and highlight all of the areas that we are outperforming the school district in light of all of these traumatic events, right? And so that's really what we focused on before I had met the superintendent, before anybody. I knew the district was taking, they were kind of decreasing in their overall performance levels, and I knew we were increasing. So that's, an underlying most important component of renewal is that you have to be doing good, right? You have to be doing good work, focus on your good work, highlight your good work, run a tight ship, do your things, but then how do you show everybody what you're doing? And how do you drive your point home as to the good and the performance levels? And that's really where Parsec can come in here. So let me make sure I covered everything in that slide. Yes, okay. So again, my energy kind of going into this renewal, I was really, really nervous, and I will use those unprofessional words to say how I was feeling, but it was really hard for me, right? I had never been through anything like this. I had weathered many, many things in my position over the years, but nothing quite like this. And so starting to work with Patrick and Parsec and really looking at our data through this neutral, grounded lens of like, yeah, okay, you're feeling all of these things, but let's really look at what is your story showing here, and what data can we pull, and what can we show. And this started to kind of come together, and I started to feel better and better and better, because I'm like, look, right, this is good. We are doing good. I can say, right, all of these things are doing really well. And the way that, Parsec supports and puts this together, it helps leaders like myself who have so many other things to do. There's so many things that we are balancing and managing all the time. It's hard to put the time and energy into something like, compiling your data and making it accessible to everybody who needs to see it. And so there was, a lot of work and energy from Parsec's side to put this data, tell the data story for us, so that we really had kind of an airtight argument at the end of the day. Right. And being that there was no governing board, and there's this one new person who had no context of us or anything, for us to be able to sit down with him and be like, look, look at what is happening. So over, 7 years of trauma, you guys have been crashing and burning, while we have been, really increasing our performance because of our flexible program model, and our committed staff and all these things. We could really tell this story of how we were able to persevere and succeed kind of in light of all of the challenges that have come our way, which was really important. And so, we felt like it was critical. And, charters with their 3-tiered renewal, there's all these rules around charter renewal. You have to be performing as well as the state or better, as well as your district or better. You can get a 3-year, a 5-year, a 7-year renewal, like all these different components. We felt like the pieces that were the most critical to highlight for our district administrator was overall academic performance, right? How do we compare to you with the SBAC? What does our local assessment data show? Are we meeting, thresholds that these assessments have put out there for us? How does our SPED and our attendance compare to you, and all of this? And so when we did this review with the support of Parsec, it really showed that pretty much all data points we were showing higher success than our district. And there were a couple that were really, in my opinion, the most important to highlight, because you can't argue with it. That's the other thing, is you can't argue with the data, and you can't argue with the graphs that show you what the data is doing. So there were at least 3 that were the most important in our kind of charter presentation that Patrick put together for us, and I wanted him to highlight those.
All right, thanks, Taletha. I will say just up front that working with Taletha has been just a great experience. I've learned so much from her, and she has just such a strong understanding of her system and her school and the needs. So, from my side, it made it relatively easy. All I had to do was just do all the fun stuff, which is generate the charts and visuals and help tell that story. So a little bit spoiled with that one. But just to reiterate what Taletha is saying is, when we're providing charter renewal support for partners, we really do try to come at it from a neutral third-party lens. Like, what is the data telling us? Not necessarily immediately looking for favorable things. It's just what is every data point saying about this partner? And really, we come at it with the lens of, if I was the authorizer and I'm looking for a reason not to renew you, what are the pain points that I'm going to identify? And we try to make sure we flesh those out during the initial workshops that we provide for this, just to help kind of proactively address anything like that. So, for example, if your growth wasn't so great for a certain student group, we might dive into like which actual grade levels is that coming from, and then help the partner talk through what is your plan to speak to this during your renewal. Like, because even if not every data point looks perfect, obviously you have to be able to speak to it and like talk about what your plan is to address that, right? So that's kind of how we approach it. Just again, authorize our point of view, and we really do try to stick to what is actually legally required for charter renewal. And as many of you versus the state is usually what is required for academic and non-academic indicators. And then for local assessments, we look at the AB 1505 guidance for 1 year's growth, and we kind of center everything around that. So after we've done all that, the goal of this support process is just to leave no stone unturned. We really do go through all of the data, and Talitha knows we provide just like way too many visuals and charts during the workshop process, and we really whittle that down because we want to make sure, again, we're addressing any potential pain points that might be there, and also, of course, highlighting all the bright spots. And then through that process, we help the partners kind of build that data narrative. So we're not like writing the petition, right? But we're helping them tell their data story in a way that's really easy to back up and really solid. And really our goal is to help our partners when they actually go up for renewal and they submit their petition, leave it to where there's just like no question about whether they should be renewed or not. It's just like an absolute slam dunk, like almost like overdoing it. Like, look at all these reasons we should exist, right? And so with that in mind, we try to gear our visuals, like the one you're seeing on your screen, to kind of a storytelling aspect, just make it as simple to understand as possible. We all know data can be really intimidating sometimes, and we can get real into the weeds with lots of different data points. But we typically try to just narrow it down to what's required. So you can see with this example, it's just Plumas Charter versus their authorizing district, which is Plumas Unified in this case, and then the state of California. And like Talitha already mentioned, the biggest strength here obviously is Plumas versus the authorizer. So they're just so much more high performing. And that was a real bright spot to pull out of that data. You can go ahead and go to the next one. So in addition to academic indicators, we also, of course, look at all the non-academic indicators. We also do help our partners gather the qualitative piece too using Parsec Real during the process. We didn't highlight that today, but for many partners, that's a really important piece to grab that community and student voice, and we would incorporate that too. So again, in this case, we can see that chronic absenteeism was just a super bright spot for Plumas, not just against their authorizing district, but the state of California too. So they're getting kids to come to school. So again, it wasn't hard to tell the story of why Plumas charter should exist, right? And then the last little visual we have is just a little sample. If you can go to the next slide for me. It's just a little sample of some of the local assessment data that we gather. So like I mentioned, we try to focus on what's legally required. So we look at all the state guidance. There's lots of guidance around all the different local assessments that exist out there. And we dive into it and really go through, like I said, with a fine tooth comb and find where are the bright spots in your local assessment data and where are the spots that you might need to speak to. And try to make, again, simple charts that help our partners speak to any potential like growth areas or the bright spots, just to kind of highlight the awesome things that are happening.
Yeah, and I don't know how, other leaders in the room, how they feel about like creating charts, but I definitely don't feel good about it. And when you look at, we have access to this wide variety of data at our fingertips, and we know that it's telling a story, and we can fight with Excel all day. And I was doing that before Parsec. I fought valiantly with Excel, right, to create what I wanted out of it. But at the end of the day, that's really like one of these biggest supports that Parsec can offer, is it takes that off of you and you can focus on the story, right? So the charts, the data can be compiled for you in a way that's easy to understand. And like Patrick said, there was, like 45 charts that he made, and we distilled it, right? There was like 20 that I ended up talking about, but then practicing them with him so that I really understood what I was saying, like just bringing that data to me so I wasn't fighting to get it to tell me what I needed it to say, if that makes sense, is really, I think, the beauty of the service there that everyone should do, because it's just way better to have that level of support. I'll just say that. So if we could go to the next slide. Understanding the district's focus points, for those of us that have, been around in our charters for a while, this is probably really obvious, but I just can't say that enough, especially with a turbulent renewal, is like know who that leadership is and what you're dealing with and what is the most important to them. And, being through 4 renewals and 8 superintendents, each one is different. This renewal was by far the most different, but also the most compelling because of how much better we had done over the last 7 years than them. So that was really great. But everyone had, each superintendent, each district lead has a different focus. Try to understand what that is. That's going to give you the most success going into renewal, is what is the most important to them, and make sure that you speak to that specifically. Are they most concerned about how certain ethnic groups are performing? Are they most concerned about your SPED students? Are they most concerned, about your governance? Whatever it is, and I've had many different takes on what's the most important. Know what it is, and make sure you're connecting with that district leadership to understand that. And then being confident of your program. I think that going through this process with Parsec, coming into it as nervous as I was and coming out of it as confident as I felt, really, it can help you understand your program a little better and help you to I guess stand firmer in the good work that you're doing. And that's really important, right? You want to be confident, and you want to make sure that the district really understands how your programs are operating, why they're different, and why they're important to the communities that they serve. And like what you can see from our data over the last 7 years is our charter model being resilient, being responsive. Like, we were able to keep our students performing at a much higher level and keep them more stable during extremely turbulent times. And they were not, right? So you can't argue with that kind of data as it's shown to you. So that shows how important the model is to a community, because it can really help keep everybody stable, even through really trying times. And then just kind of lastly, outcomes and lesson learned. And so our charter was renewed. It was actually the easiest renewal I've ever been through. It was the most stressful at the beginning. There were tears, there was anger, as I'm trying to figure it out. But then once it got presented, you can't argue with it. It was renewed a month later. It's never been reviewed, a month later. I've had my district take my petition to the lawyers to try to find fault in what I was doing. I've had like that level of scrutiny, and this one was like, oh yeah, we can't argue with you. You're approved. And so we successfully went through that. I'm like, was that it? That's really anticlimactic. Like, we're done? Okay, great. So a month later, we have another 5-year renewal. It doesn't, you can't say enough as a leader too, like, as you're going through your everyday business, run a tight ship. If we could go to the next slide too, Shay. I'm talking on the next one. There we go. The integrity of your program is the most important day to day, right? You always have to, be above board in all of your operations. I mean, that's a given, right? We do that in our schools. Be confident in what you are doing, know why you're doing what you're doing. Lessons that kind of I learned specifically, what I would not do again is stress out so hard about the process rather than immediately focusing on the good. And so, especially when you have, adversity coming at you, you have challenges, you have unknowns, you have all that, really finding the space to stand proud in the good you're doing and knowing that you're doing that. And then what I would do again is I would absolutely use Parsec to help me with all of my renewals, because it just creates that neutral third party, grounded data expertise. You're not having to fight with, all of your multiple data sources. It's all pulled together for you. You have a Patrick who can talk you through it, make sure you understand it, help you make meaning out of it. It creates a much smoother anchoring process to use support like that. And that's, I think, the bulk of what I wanted to share with everybody today. So I hope something resonated with you.
I'm sure it did, Taletha, and thank you for sharing your story and also sharing lessons learned. I do want to open it up to any Q&A that you may have for Taletha as she went through the process, or also for us at Parsec. Yeah, so come off of mute. Any questions that you all may have, feel free to ask. No questions. Patrick, anything that you wanna share before we let everyone out?
Yeah, I just want to know, I would be curious to hear, Taletha, your thoughts about, now that you've been renewed for 5 years. So does that mean you're not thinking about renewal now for 5 years? So maybe you can share about just like how do you proactively kind of start thinking about the next renewal as it's coming up?
I think renewal is always an ongoing process, right? I mean, we have our annual goals through our LCAP. We have, we are kind of always changing how we can maximize engagement of our staff into important processes, into decisions for the school. We just implemented, a new model called the shared leadership model, which we actually learned from a CSCC conference from a school in Truckee, which was amazing, where, our school, like we have LCAP goal groups now, and every teacher and every staff member is on one, and they bring more authentic feedback to the table that then the school can keep working toward. All of our normal processes, our curriculum adoption and review, really, paying attention every day with the help of Parsec and our dashboard of, how is our data continuing to look at, like, oh, this metric might be slipping. What are we doing? How do we adjust our RTI? It's a constant process. And then along that too, one of the other things that we're doing with Parsec is having Patrick come and talk to our staff. And so he did that once. And I'm going to toot your horn, Patrick. What's great about Patrick is that he was a classroom teacher. He kind of understands teachers, and they're a funny breed. They're kind of hard to get to sometimes. They only want to listen sometimes. And so Patrick came and last fall and did a session with our teachers on a data deep dive, and help them look at their specific class data and make meaning of it, and also help them pull the threads of, like, where's the weakest link here. And he did that in a way that was engaging, and they were with it. I got a lot of great feedback from teachers, like that was really helpful. So that's now going to be an annual process for us, is have Patrick come in September, look at our beginning of year data, and kind of help everybody drive their kind of tiered, RTI approach with our group. So yeah, it's ongoing. It really is ongoing. And for a school like ours, I mean, as rural as we are, to have third-party supports, and we have a few different organizations we partner with, EdTech, or now Vertex is one of them too, to have these third-party supports it's just really nice to know, like, you're not gonna, you have a lot of support. You're not going to make the mistakes you might make without the third-party support. You have somebody really looking who is non-threatening and neutral, like, oh, did you look at this? Did you make sure you're attending to this? So that's all, I think, crucial for just day-to-day and annual reflective processes, to have some of that work in place.
Thank you, Taletha.
Yeah.
And I want to share a comment that's in the chat from Scarlett. Not a question, but it's amazing how much clean, well-structured data makes this entire process so much easier. Thank you for sharing, Taletha, and thank you, Parsec, for your work in this session.
Yeah, thank you. Great.
Yeah. All right. If there aren't any other questions for us, I do want to just remind you all that we will be sharing the recording out to all you that attended. And what I'll do too is I'll include Taletha's contact if you ever want to reach out to her to get more insight on her charter renewal process. But with that, we will see you all next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Next webinar is going to be about overcoming harmful language. So we'll have Josh Wolf, who will be sharing some strategies that he's used at their school in Utah. But with that, everyone, have a wonderful Wednesday and wonderful rest of your week. And we'll see you all next Wednesday at 10 a.m.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, of
Thank
course.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.